quote here. Let me read a quote. We're talking about Elliot Rodgers, so let me read a quote. I don't know how to make the world a better place without holding women accountable for choosing assholes. If women chose nice guys, we would have a peaceful world. That doesn't sound like a men's rights activist to you?
So Matt read a Stefan Molyneux quote in the pretense it was Roger, and if someone looked at the two selective quotes they would seem similar. However, they lack context and as such they are nothing alike. Roger wanted to quote hold women accountable end quote, because they would not give him their affection. Stefan on the other hand wants to hold them accountable for economic and non-selfish reasons. He wants to reduce child abuse and create a utopia. In this regard they are nothing alike. What Matt has done is no different to say an Islamic fundamentalist taking one verse out of context. However, I can play a similar game. In the below bar is an article titled, Jews as the Problem. I quote, why blame Jews? A reason, again, is that Jews control the mass media corporations, and thus control how Jews and their corruption get portrayed in society. They are the ones who force portrayals of this second depression as an economic reality for which we are all responsible, a crisis no particular group created. Yet, there are real people, real Jewish actors, who did in fact create this horrific reality the world now faces. End quote. This sounds like something of Stormfront, only it isn't. In fact it isn't about Jews at all. It's an article from Racism Review about white men as the problem. Is there a link between anti-Semitism, the Jews control the world rhetoric, and patriarchy theory, I wonder? Question mark.
Let me just point out that I can give you a list of men who go to feminist conferences, who speak out for feminism. I don't understand what the point is of listing women who are part of the men's rights movement. I mean, if you ask me after recent events, I might need to ask for proof that these women aren't just Stefan Molyneux impersonating them. But
By the way, what he is referring to by the Stefan Molyneux impersonator is he made a video called The Truth About Frozen. In the comments section he copied and pasted a quote from a woman into his own share reply, which made people confused whether he forgot to use a sock account and got caught. I think Stefan should have used some quotation marks around the quote with the source. For Matt to bring it up is a bit low as there is no proof he used, or thought he had, a sock account and seems quite preposterous. Whilst it is true that you could easily name individuals in the feminist cause, they tend to be yes men and are extremely limited in what they can say. They are seen at best as useful tools and at worst as infiltrators. The Huffington Post even ran an article, How to Be a Better Male Feminist, whereby tip number 3 admits that you should not expect an automatic welcome and others effectively tell men to shut up. Female MRAs on the other hand are actually a pleasant surprise in the MRM, a sort of happenstance. They are not puppets or props for the MRM but instead have their own reasons for being an MRM, such as having a son or just seeing the disaster that is family court and wanting change. Also Matt alludes to financial motives, but in truth I think they were lucky to get reimbursed for travel.
Rephrase that. A speaker named Fred Jones mentioned his fears about his son being raped after being arrested in New Orleans. He's kind of small and kind of cute, good looking, you know what I mean? You know what they do with, and then he cut himself off and the audience laughed. Barbara Kay, who is one of the women you brought up. The vast majority of female students allegedly raped on campus are actually voicing buyer's remorse from alcohol-fueled, promiscuous behavior involving murky lines of consent on both sides. It's true, it's their get out of jail free card, you know, like Monopoly, and everybody laughed. And then you, this is not from the conference, but you yourself, Paul, on record is saying, joking about raping a male feminist. Hopefully before we are done, MRAs of differing views will find more common ground, and PZ Myers will be limping to the drugstore for some KY jelly. Warren Farrell came out and said, if a man ignoring a woman's verbal no is committing date rape, then a woman who says no with her verbal language, but yes with her body language, is committing.
I can't speak for Warren, Although I don't think he is advocating that women should have to have sex in exchange for a date, but that they should be open about it. I watched a video a while back. A woman used dating websites to get free meals with men and it worked sickeningly well. I think Warren would propose that dates should be 50-50 in cost. As for rape jokes, I think the problem here is that you, Matt, are proposing a ridiculously high standard. We make sick jokes to get over traumatic experiences or anxieties. Papers have done research into the topic and as far as I am concerned it is normal. I seriously doubt you, Matt, go through life without making an inappropriate joke being a comedian. I don't, however, think rape jokes are indicative of rape culture, far from it. These sick jokes have an effect because society makes it taboo. The fact that we laugh to them is indicative that rape is considered abhorrent.
I'm not so sure that you want to talk about the real issues, to be honest with you, because let me put it this way to all the men's rights activists who are watching this. I think you have some legitimate issues. There are some legitimate issues. You frame them as men's rights issues, but they really aren't. They're not men's rights issues. A lot of them are feminist in nature, actually. And these when I come out and I say I'm mocking men's rights activists and the men's rights movement, that's exactly what I'm doing. I think your movement is a joke. I think it has failed you. Let's take this for example. Paul says he wants to talk about the real issues. I want to talk about the real issues. There's a practice that's gone on across the nation. It is very prevalent in NYC that specifically targeted people for just walking down the street. And this practice focused on men. In 55% of the cases, the suspect was black, and in 10% of the cases, the suspect was white. Young white men made up 3.8% of stops. Young Latino men made up 6% of stops.
You have lost the debate here, Matt. You have conceded that men have legitimate issues and therefore the men's movement is justified. What you are doing from now on is a diversion, by criticism on things the MRM do not do. This is absurd, as AVFM is only a small organization that doesn't have the government funds that women's rights groups gain. That being said, let's look at your criticism of race. Well, it's true that black men are stopped and searched more, and if your statement is true about the reduction in stop and frisk, then AVFM was not needed. There are only so many resources AVFM has, and as such tackling specific issues, such as drug laws, are a poor attribution of funds, as the political will for change is A, too high, and B, there are already specific dedicated groups to specific issues. By delving into all issues, AVFM risks overdoing itself and the message becomes blurred. I am sure in the future AVFM will do more journalism and activism in these areas, but as it is, we are a young group trying to reach liftoff. While on topic of incarceration rates and race, whilst it is true that black men get stopped and searched more than white men, women get stopped and searched more than men, suggesting that it is not primarily race that is the problem but gender. Black women have a lower incarceration rate than white men, for example, which is quite damning for race theories. Furthermore, and I will try and find a source for this, when you take into consideration single motherhood, there is no disparity in prison population. If this is true, then by changing laws to encourage 50 hours 50 minutes parenting will have a knock-on effect. But I have theories of my own to explain why black people are incarcerated more. 1. They commit more visible crimes, and as such they get stereotyped, causing a vicious self-fulfilling prophecy cycle. 2. Sociologists attribute black men as being hypermasculine. Masculinity itself is seen as dangerous and toxic, and as such by adding hyper you are implying that being even more male is a disease in addition to being a toxic gender. Black women suffer a similar problem, except they are seen as just masculine or beastie, as I have heard T.J. Sotomayor say.
I could bring up many issues too that happen to women. Women commit suicide. Women go to jail. Women develop mental illness. I don't see why that issue is a men's issue. And on top of that, the fact of just pointing out random examples, it's the equivalent of the religious rights war on Christmas argument.
It just isn't a very good counter-argument, Matt. Feminism is not a conspiracy. The EU funds feminist groups under the disguise of domestic violence aid and then use that funding to influence politicians in order to reject 50-50 parenting. They also lobbied successfully to modify Obama's stimulus, so that there would be more jobs for the gals. So no, it is nothing like the war on Christmas. Also, yes, women do commit suicide and go to jail. However, it is not at the same rate as men. Not even close. Also, women have groups looking out for them thanks to gynocentrism. There is a RamZPaul video where he calls a prison agency asking why there is a program for women to get out of prison but none for men. They responded that the public and politicians were unhappy at having the highest female incarceration rate in America. Ramsey then pointed out that the men in that state still had a higher incarceration rate.
Instead of focusing on these hunger strikers at this California prison, why didn't men's rights activists pool their money together, show up outside that California prison, and take a stand? Why don't I ever see men's rights activists taking this stand in public? Why not protest in the streets for these men? Why not go outside that prison? I don't understand it. I actually want to ask Paul here, why is it that when I go to protest, when you see the anti-war protests, again, the majority of victims in war, in terms of deaths, casualties, who die overseas, are men? You have that stat. I'm sure you're going to flaunt it. Why do I see feminist groups out there? Why do I see progressive groups out there? I don't see the men's rights activists on the street. Why aren't the men's rights activists on the street?
First of all, feminism does not equal women. Attacking feminism is not an attack on women. As for pooling resources, well, how much resources do you think AVFM has? It comprises of broke men who have been screwed over in alimony and doesn't have access to government funds like feminists do. As for the anti-war campaign, AVFM was founded in, I believe, 2009, and as such the Iraq War was before AVFM and the internet culture we have today. Speaking of which, we are a very geographically sparse group, making it very difficult to meet together. You also mentioned liberals and feminism campaigning against war. I would really love a citation of feminist groups making the war a huge priority in the run-up to 2003 invasion. Regardless, 1 million people took to the streets to no avail, so I failed to see what the point is here, Matt. Matt also mentions that 85% of domestic violence is committed by men, revising his last study of 90%. I believe he is referring to the domestic violence survey of 1993 to 2001. I don't really fancy going into a statistic war and dissecting every flaw in the survey, so I will just leave a link in the low bar from a socialist paper, The Guardian, that reports that 40% of domestic violence is perpetuated on men. I will also link to ManWomanMyth on the 1/4 myth.
Get the last few minutes. Go whenever you're ready, and then if we want to keep going, whatever.
I'm gonna look at the camera here, and I'm gonna talk to the men's rights activists who are watching this debate. People like Paul and the men's rights movement, the voice in this movement, they have failed you. But women are not running our Congress. A woman is not our commander-in-chief. Women, in fact, are saving lives. Because, listen, you blame feminists for things like workplace deaths because men are doing the hard jobs, apparently. Listen, what about all the men who died when they were coal mining back hundreds of years ago? All the factories 100 years ago, before women even had the right to vote, when women in some parts of this country were still viewed as chattel, the property of men. How was it that feminists was harming those men and causing their deaths? I think the men's rights movement has done men's issues, which are feminist issues, which are human issues, more harm than good. I don't see the men's rights movement out there agitating for the things they want. The most important things. Our boys are being sent off to war, hundreds of thousands of men.
Well, there is a lot of stupidity in this final statement. It's hard to know where to begin. Has Elam failed us? I find this preposterous considering how young AVFM is. I find it preposterous that men's rights search analytics is correlated with AVFM. I find it preposterous that you can criticize the rapid rate of AVFM and declare it a failure. Women are not running our Congress, but then I thought gender was a social construct. I also find this shockingly hypocritical, as liberals will always talk about how Congress is bought and that politicians do not represent the people. So why is it so shocking that a lobby, of which 1 in 5 people say they are feminist, have significant influence in our laws? Obama himself is a feminist and was only voted in because of the female demographic. Men voted Romney, women Obama. Women make up 51% of the population equals women win. Also, nobody is blaming workplace deaths on feminism, and I can't believe Elam didn't correct you on this. We bring up workplace deaths as a reminder of the contribution of men and to point out the hypocrisy of quotas for the cushy air-conditioned jobs and not for these glass cellar jobs.